From the CyberHub bunker and studio, you're tuning in to the CyberHub Podcast. And now for your host and CISO, James Azar.
Good morning, security gang. Welcome to another episode of the CyberHub Podcast, Wednesday, October 16th, 2024. Winter's around the corner, y'all. Fall weather's here. I know it's crazy. Like, summer was Sunday, Wednesday. Like, I went from AC to heat. But that's beyond the point of why we do the show, because we've got a lot of cybersecurity stories to talk about, including China breaking RSA quantum encryption. And what does that really mean? We're going to kind of peel off all the layers of the hype and give you the truth, as well as a bunch of different vulnerabilities that are out there in the wild being exploited, and a few stories that will infuriate you like they have infuriated me getting ready for the show this morning. So without further ado, join me for our coffee cup cheers, a tradition here on the CyberHub Podcast. We're going to try to get you everything in under 15 minutes, but I've got my double espresso here. And again, this is a Segafredo espresso today. So it's not my typical Lavazza. It's a Segafredo. It's aromatic. It's got really, really good intensity because I need a kick this morning. Coffee cup cheers, y'all. There we have it. There we go. All right, we'll start off with Cisco confirming to Bleeping Computer that they're investigating recent claims that it suffered a data breach after some threat actors started selling Cisco-related files on the dark web. The statement comes from threat actor Intel Broker. He said he and two others called Energy Weapon User and ZJJ breached Cisco on October 6th of this year, so just about 10 days ago, and stole a large amount of developer data from the company. They say they compromised data in GitHub projects, GitLab projects, SonarQube projects, source code, hard-coded credentials, certificate customer CRC, Cisco confidential documents, Jira tickets, API tokens, AWS private buckets, Cisco technology SRCs, Docker builds, Azure storage buckets, private and public keys, SSL certificates, Cisco premium products, and more. They've also shared some samples of the data, including a database, customer information, various customer documentation, and some screenshots of customer management portals. They haven't provided additional details of how the data was obtained, but one can only assume. Cisco, for their end, are saying, we neither confirm nor deny this. We're currently investigating it. Nothing appeared as an anomaly in our environment up until we saw this data leaked online. So if that's the case, expect to see a lot coming from this story as we keep tracking it here in the next few days and few weeks to come, as Cisco's probably going to have to answer to the claims by Intel Broker one way or the other. We're going to move to a bunch of different vulnerabilities. Some companies don't like to add Patch Tuesday vulnerabilities to their Patch Tuesday, one of those being Oracle. And that's because that 334 new security patches as part of their October critical patch update, including 186 fixes for vulnerabilities that could be exploited remotely without authentication, 220 unique CVEs in this October 2024 CPU. 220. Let that sink. 3 dozen, not a dozen, 3 dozen. That's over 10%. That's nearly 20% of these CVEs patch and resolve critical severity issues. 3 dozen. Oracle also announced a large number of patches for their MySQL with 45 fixes, 12 that could be exploited remotely without authentication. Fusion middleware, 3225 of which could be exploited remotely. Financial services, 2015, which could be exploited remotely without authentication. And e-business suite with 18 vulnerabilities and one that could be exploited remotely. Additionally, there are communication applications, 13 to 10, analytics 12 to 7, and PeopleSoft 12 to 2. Oracle also released a small number of patches for Application Express, ESBase, Golden Gate, no SQL database, food and beverage application, hospitality applications, Hyperion, retail applications, secure backups, SQL developers, Sybil CRM, supply chain, utilities, and virtualization. Yes, if you're an Oracle shop, you may want to make sure you start prioritizing the patches based on what's critical to your business, where critical data could be, and where disruption might happen. These remote no authentication vulnerabilities are significant, and in most of the cases they're low complexity. Well, GitHub is also not escaping this. They've released a critical update for GitHub Enterprise Server. It could lead to unauthorized access to the affected instances. This is a critical severity. It's been given a CVSS score of 9.5 and is being tracked to CVE 2024 90487. The bug was introduced in May as part of remediations released for CVE 2024 4985, which was a critical authentication bypass defect that would have allowed attackers to forge SAML responses and gain admin access to the enterprise server. According to Microsoft, the newly resolved flaw is a variant of an initial vulnerability that could lead to authentication bypass. It could bypass the SAML single sign-on authentication with the optional encrypted assertion feature, allowing unauthorized provisions of users and access to the instant and exploiting an improper verification of cryptographic signature vulnerability in GitHub Enterprise Server. The code hosting platform points out that encrypted assertions are not enabled by default, and enterprise server instances not configured with SAML SSO or which rely on SAML SSO authentication without encrypted assertions are not vulnerable. The vulnerability was reserved in GitHub Enterprise Server versions 3.11.16, 3.12.10, 3.13.5, and 3.14.2. So you want to make sure you get those addressed. CISA is flagging an additional vulnerability to its KEF catalog, this one belonging to SolarWinds Web Helpdesk. That's CVE 2024-28987, a CVSS score of 9.1. It's a hard-coded credential issue that allows remote unauthenticated attackers to access internal WHD, that's the Web Helpdesk, functionality and modify data. SolarWinds warns about this in August when it released a second hotfix addressing CVE 2024-28986, which was the Java deserialization vulnerability there as well. The company also released additional hotfixes there, but now this is being exploited in the wild with proofs of concepts, including IOCs and POCs available now, which have been published by SolarWinds and now CISA. There's still roughly 830 SolarWinds instances exposed to the internet, mainly in the SLED market segment, that's state, local, and education. SolarWinds announced the release of Web Helpdesk 12.8.3 hotfix 3 that addresses this vulnerability. You want to make sure you get that addressed as well. Google on Tuesday announced a fresh Chrome browser update that addressed 17 different vulnerabilities, including 13 security defects reported by external researchers. And Google Chrome, this is one aspect. Like I often diss Google for their Google Play Store, rightfully. But when it comes to Chrome and their external bug bounty program, they own that playbook. They own it every single time, because every time they do a Chrome update, there's someone outside of the organization that contributed to reducing the risk of using Chrome. And if you wonder why Chromium-based browsers, why Chrome has become kind of like the standard for browsers, it's external bug bounty. If you're not doing a bug bounty program as a CISO in your organization, you got to ask yourself why. It's worth doing it. It really is. And Google's shown you why. So the most severe of the externally reported bugs is CVE 2024-90954. It's a high-risk use after free defect in AI, which Google handed out a $36,000 bug bounty to. The browser update also resolved 5 medium free after use after free issues that impact web authentication, UI, DevTools, Dawn, and parcel tracking. So all in all, Google said it paid out $72,000 in bug bounty rewards to the reporting researchers. So good for them. That latest version is now out. Make sure you go check out our Substack, jamescesar.substack.com. You'll find all the latest writing there. And this Friday, I'm really excited. I spoke to Esther Pinto. She's the CISO over at Anecdotes. We had a really, really fun conversation around kind of her role and cyber and AI and the CISO CEO relationship and startups and so forth. So really, really exciting conversation. That podcast is going to drop on Friday at 11 a.m. and there'll be some exclusive stuff only available at our Substack. So go subscribe there to get it. Now we'll move to what I like to call the clickbait headline, but not really clickbait. It's not all clickbait. There's meat behind the click. So we're going to ignore what CSO Online says here for just a moment, because they like to write it in a way that causes panic because, they want to get the clicks. So the Chinese Journal of Computers released an article based on a paper and an actual research done at Shanghai University that outlined how D-Wave machines, which are quantum machines, were used to break the RSA encryption and attack symmetric encryption systems So the research team was led by a professor by the name of Wang Chao from Shanghai University, and they found a way to attack encryption methods like RSA using D-Wave advantage. They successfully factored a 22-bit RSA integer, demonstrating the potential for quantum machines to tackle cryptographic problems. And again, most cryptography is math. The advantage of quantum computers, really beyond anything else, is they're able to do math very, very fast and evolve extremely fast. And China doesn't have some of the shortfalls that the US has when it comes to energy. China is building power plants at record levels. We're not. So they're going to be able to potentially speed up and get their hands on multiple quantum computers quicker because they're going to have the energy and the ability to power them. And these require a lot of energy. That's why yesterday on the show, I talked about Google's investment in mini nuclear power plants, kind of these micro power plants that are supposed to really kind of power their heavy data centers, right? Kind of being a big project. Well, China's doing the same. And again, all of this comes together, folks. You got to, in order to understand security, you got to understand business operations. And you also have to understand how your adversaries operate from a business perspective in order to launch their security attacks. So the study shows how quantum annealing could turn cryptographic attacks into a combinational optimization problem, making them much easier to solve. Does this mean that that's it? RSA is done? No. Look, NIST released their post-quantum cryptography standards. They weren't really new encryption, but they were rather more of how to manage post-quantum cryptography. They threw something in there called crypto agility, which is the anticipation that you're going to probably have to go through a whole bunch of crypto every time because quantum computers are just going to break it. So there is going to need to be a move to something greater. A shout out to our friends over at Cloak. We've had Brian Penny on the show before. Brian's spoken about kind of how they see this as being non-algebraic in order to defeat quantum computers. They've got some really interesting tech. That's KLOCH. Go check them out. I'm on their board of advisors just for full disclosure, but definitely something worthwhile looking at, especially with this story. Amazon says since launching Passkeys last year and rolling them out, 175 million customers started using this security features, and their sign-in is 6 times faster than it would have been any other way. So good adoption there in news from Amazon. And the UK's National Cybersecurity Center, the head of there, Richard Horne, who made his first international address during Singapore International Cyber Week, is warning about the widening gap between cyber threats and the world's collective ability to defend them. And again, he is living in some sort of industrialized conception that cybersecurity is a global problem that can only be addressed by globalization, by everyone tackling it together. And then he goes on to blame that technology by nature is broken, and technology companies by nature are broken because they produce vulnerable products. So we've got to do collective action, and that collective action is risk of widening the gap between escalating threats to our societies, critical services and businesses, and our ability to defend and be resilient. That's his quote. Formerly, he was the head of cybersecurity practice at PwC. So Horne is the first executive with a technical academic background, and he's got a PhD in mathematics and cryptography. But he's talking about the solutions here from a technology perspective, ignoring the responsibility of government to create deterrence in order to assist in bridging that gap. See, this gap is not going to be resolved by just resiliency is important. He talks about resiliency and being able to recover. 100% with you. 100%. Talks about ensuring security is built into technology from the outset. That's great, but most technology that's being used today is old technology. The cost of redoing that and the rollout of redoing that and the features and configurations are complex because this technology was built differently then. That means in some cases, you've got to rewrite your entire product line. You've got to address every aspect of it. You've got to extensively test it before you could launch it. So all of that are not easy. And so there is a need for a private-public relationship, but there's also a need on the government side to create a deterrence against nation states that want to launch these cyber attacks and host the people that launch these cyber attacks. And that's absolutely true. So something to keep in mind there, a bit infuriating for me, was kind of this whole thing. Well, technology companies should do better. Very rarely do I hear someone, I've met CEOs of technology companies all over. I've never had any one of them say, yeah, we don't take security seriously, or what's the cyber thing? They all say, hey, we're trying to do the best that we can, but we have all of these different things. And as CISOs, the way we bridge the gap is by becoming business operation minded in security. Again, watch the episode on Friday with Esther Pinto. We gave great examples. She shared a bunch. I shared a bunch. It was a fun conversation with Esther. You'll really enjoy it. And we talk about this in a lot of detail. So check that out. And finally, Sweden and Finland partnered to take down the Sipulittie criminal marketplace, which was launched back in February of 2023. It was originally focused on Finland before expanding to cover other Scandinavian countries. So all in all, they've now taken that down. So good guys prevail there. Of course, new one will pop up in a few weeks. But until then, we get to take a sigh of breath of relief and say for a few weeks, there's no cybercrime marketplace before its replacement pops up. That's it for our show this morning. We'll be back tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern live with all the latest and greatest. Until then, thank you all for tuning in. Have a great rest of your day. And most importantly, y'all, stay cyber.
We love feedback, so make sure to connect with us on social media and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform.